This week on Crossroads Politics.
Indiana would be one of the only states with a permanent government-controlled military force.
Should Indiana's governor be able to deploy military police to Hoosier cities? And in the wake of another deadly immigration shooting in Minneapolis.
Say it once, say it twice!
We will not put up with ICE!
Indiana's leaders respond. Plus,
it is the rules that are found in the Ten Commandments that are the basis of our moral right and wrong.
do the Ten Commandments belong in Indiana classrooms? Lawmakers push forward a bill to make it happen. And
so far, we've been able to work with ICE.
Governor Braun sits down to discuss everything from jobs to potential ICE operations in Indianapolis. But first, as we reach the midpoint of this year's legislative session, we track the big moves and surprising trends shaping the future of our state. Hello and welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove. Monday will mark the midpoint of this unusual session at the State House, a session that basically began early in December for this big redistricting push, no doubt you remember. That means by Monday, every bill has to advance out of its original chamber to have a chance to keep going. Let's start with a look at the big picture here. Emily Longnecker is at the State House. Emily, you've been there since the first rumblings about redistricting. So what are your takeaways on this session so far?
You know, Dustin, it really does all start with that redistricting push. As we've covered several times here on Crossroads, it really was the singular push that brought national attention here to the Indiana legislature. Everyone from the president to the governor to outside groups were putting huge pressure on state lawmakers to get it done. They started the session early and we saw big ad buys in the state, but despite all that effort, the push failed. But even beyond the money and political capital, lawmakers spent time on redistricting. The whole session has been moved up because of the week spent on it, and that has made this whole session feel different. Despite that, lawmakers are having success getting their big agenda items through. Speaker Houston outlined 4 bills he really wanted to get done, and 3 of them are advancing. A big focus for both Republicans and Democrats going into the session has been affordability. Lawmakers are taking a crack at Indiana's spiking utility costs and housing costs that have really exploded since the COVID pandemic. Both of those bills advanced. The 4th bill, 1004, deals with another topic that has gotten a lot of attention this session, education. As we talked about a little earlier, bills dealing with what is taught in schools are advancing. We have also seen a bill to ban cell phones in schools advance from the Senate to the House, where lawmakers in the Education Committee will first consider it. And on Thursday, there was a big push on a bill that would completely reshape Indianapolis Public Schools, one of the state's largest districts. We'll have more on that in a little bit. Another thing that really loomed large here this week down at the State House has been the weather. Most legislative work ground to a halt this past Monday because of the snow, the ice, the bitter cold temperatures. The Ways and Means Committee room was actually experienced a leak after the storm, and the Indiana Department of Administration had to take a look. On Thursday, House Republicans said that there was no structural damage and they plan to use the room next week. This session certainly been full of unexpected things like that. Dustin?
Yeah, glad nobody was hurt and it wasn't worse. Originally, we were hearing there was concern that the ceiling might actually cave in or fall in. So did you get a look at that, by the way? Did you see what it looked like in there?
Yeah, and there wasn't it wasn't a lot of significant damage that you could really note, but as we said, the Department of Administration taking a look and saying that there was no real structural damage that would put anyone in danger, or that they would be using it again next week.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Emily. We'll check back in a few. Now to an update on where things stand with what's been dubbed the Bears Stadium Bill. So much attention on this one, too. That bill would create a stadium authority to attract the Chicago Bears to Indiana, and it is moving forward. These are renderings you're looking at on the screen of what it could look like in Northwest Indiana. Senate Bill 27 was referred to the House on Thursday after sailing through its third read on a 46-2 vote. Another bill that we followed would let private citizens sue people involved in abortions and make drug makers liable if their drugs are used in an abortion. It has advanced out of the Senate. Senate Bill 236 was referred to the House after a 35-10 vote on Tuesday. And a bill that critics say would criminalize homelessness has been referred to the House. Senate Bill 285 would make sleeping in most public places a misdemeanor crime. That part of the law was written by a conservative Texas think tank. The bill passed on a 29-19 vote Wednesday, with 9 Republicans joining Senate Democrats in voting against it. Despite a flurry of bills being introduced and a year of public protests, no bills specifically dealing with data centers have advanced past committees so far. Those bills arose from people who are concerned about so many data centers coming to Indiana. They claim data centers are to blame, at least partly to blame, for sharp increases in utility costs, especially electricity. The House's big utility bill, meant to drive down those rising costs, does not specifically mention data centers once. A Senate bill to legalize the firing squad for executions appears to have stalled, and a House bill dealing with execution died on its third read Wednesday on a narrow 48-47 vote that failed to get a constitutional majority. Both of those bills targeted the high cost and difficulty getting drugs for lethal injections, which remains the only legal form of execution here in Indiana. Nikki Kelly from the Capitol Chronicle joins us. Now I'm guessing, let's get to the mid-session point here and talk about your takeaways in a moment. But first I want to talk about that execution vote. That was a close one. Can you talk a little bit about what that specific bill was about?
Yeah, that one was it was pretty straightforward. It just said it added firing squads in addition to lethal injection, and the DOC commissioner would get to choose which one was used. Obviously, Democrats who generally oppose the death penalty were against it, and 19 Republicans also voted against it. I think there was concern about sort of how barbaric a firing squad seems. And so now one small caution, though, it could be brought up for a revote on Monday because it didn't receive 51 votes either for or against. It was under that threshold. So I don't know that they'll revote for it, but under the rules it could. Okay, so on to the rest of the session here. What are your general takeaways? I think 3 things. I think the fact that Republicans on all around are focusing on affordability is a key thing. You know, that they're acknowledging the struggle that Hoosiers are dealing with, I think has been an interesting takeaway. A second, I think, is that Governor Braun is just not involved with the legislature at all. I mean, he's just out doing his own thing. How unusual is that? It's very unusual. So I think that's significant. And then the third is I just see a lot of sort of culture war, social issues bills, whether we're, determining whose bathroom you need to use and your gender, whether it's about abortion drugs, the 10 Commandments. We're adding instruction on waiting for marriage to have kids. There's a lot of those kinds of bills floating around. And I wonder how much of that is constituent driven, people reaching out to their lawmakers versus advocacy groups, lobbyists, think tanks, that type of thing. I think it's probably a lot of advocacy groups and think tanks. I also think you can't forget that this is an election year, and so these kind of things play well in a primary for Republicans. So if they're looking at a challenger, that, this is a good year to push those through. Thank you, Nikki, for your perspective and insight. On Thursday, the Senate advanced a bill that supporters have spent years trying to get across the finish line. This one deals with medical debt and more specifically how it is collected. Emily, let's go back to you at the State House. The bill's Democratic author has been pushing for this a long time.
Yeah, the bill's co-author, Democratic State Senator Fatty Kador, he has championed this effort for a long time. He's tried to get similar bills passed in previous sessions, and those have all failed. This session, though, this bill dealing with medical debt has some bipartisan support. It also has a Republican co-author, Republican State Senator Ed Charbonneau.
Senate Bill 85 puts limits on how hospitals collect unpaid medical bills. Under the bill, liens cannot be put on people's homes to collect an unpaid medical bill. It also caps how much someone's wages can be garnished to cover medical debt. Senate Bill 85 also requires that hospitals offer patients a payment plan if they meet certain income guidelines.
The hospitals are going to say that, well, we have a payment plan and we can give them the information. Well, yeah. In many instances, that information is on page 55 of 100 pages of documents that they get when they check out of the hospital. They're not going to see that payment plan. Quite possibly, they're never going to know about that option.
Lawmakers say the bill does not remove the obligation to pay medical bills and does not prevent a debt collector from filing a lawsuit to collect on that debt.
And this bill passed out of the Senate this week by a vote of 33 to 15. Supporters like Senator Cadora say it has the possibility of impacting more than 1 million Hoosiers in a positive way. This bill now heads to the House for consideration. Dustin?
All right, Emily, thank you. Nikki, why do you think this was the year that Republicans got on board with this bill? Is it aligned with the whole affordability theme?
I think so. I mean, it has been a slow grind of gaining, approval. And last year it was close. So, I think this might be the year they can push it over. And I think the key for Republicans is not to say that they don't get to collect the debt, but just some limits on how much you can garnish at once, or, you can't take someone's house over this kind of stuff. And so I think they're just trying to find the sweet spot, and it's taken several years to get there.
Have there been any other significant wins for Democrats so far this session?
I think that one's a pretty big one so far, other than just the general idea that Republicans are paying attention to things like utility bills and other medical costs and things like that. So that's probably housing costs. So
okay. Lawmakers are also moving forward with a bill that would dramatically overhaul how Indianapolis public schools are run. Emily, let's go back to you. You were there as this big IPS reform bill was passed out of the House, right?
Yeah, Dustin, this is House Bill 1423, and it would create a new governing body that oversees IPS schools and the charter schools within its boundaries. It would oversee buildings for these school buildings, and the transportation for these schools. Thursday, lawmakers in the House spent some time debating several proposed changes to the bill. Some of those proposed changes from Democrats did not pass. The one change that did get through came from the bill's author, Republican State Representative Bob Baining. This change reshapes how the bill applies to schools. Under it, charter schools have some options to opt out of parts of the bill. The change allows a charter school to opt out of the new board controlling and managing its buildings. But that means that a charter school that opts out would have to give up access to certain funding like local property tax cash that's meant to pay off school construction and renovation debt. Also, the original bill calls for a single academic performance framework for all schools. Under the change, schools wouldn't have to follow that standard until 2028 instead of later this year. That framework would also include a process to close chronically low-performing schools.
If the school is not meeting the performance standards that have collaboratively been agreed upon, they will, the charter school authorizer is to close a charter school. IPS is same is supposed to close their school. If either entity fails to do it, you would hope that IPEC would have the authority, and the way it's drafted now, IPEC can appeal to state board, and state board can close the school.
So this amendment is quite a change from the original bill. Instead of a mandate now, it really is an option. Instead of the new corporation board being in charge, it really becomes this corporation board can lead and schools can agree to it. The process isn't over. This was just a chance this week to make changes to the bill. The full House votes on 1423 on Monday. Dustin?
All right, so not a done deal yet. Emily, thank you. Nikki, the state legislature poking at IPS is not new. Are you surprised at the direction it's taken this year?
I mean, I think focusing on the transportation and building issues was a pretty good move, but it seems like they're bleeding over a little into academic. I'm not exactly sure what makes IPS any different than, say, Fort Wayne Community Schools, another large district. So it's interesting that we're going to have a totally different system just for them.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think they'll get something through, whether it goes all the way, we'll see. But it was a collaborative process to get those recommendations in, and obviously, I think it was led by the mayor, that group, and so we'll see what gets through.
Okay. All right, Nikki, thank you very much. More to come here on Crossroads Politics.
The mission is going to improve.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Shot and killed by immigration agents. How Hoosiers from the governor's office to the U.S. Senate are responding. That's still ahead. Also, should the governor be allowed to deploy military police to Indiana cities? Lawmakers clash as a bill advances this week. But first.
Will putting "thou shalt not kill" on the wall reduce school shooting tragedies? I don't think it will.
Indiana classrooms could soon have the 10 Commandments. Next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. A bill that would allow Indiana teachers to post the 10 Commandments in schools is moving forward at the Indiana State House. But Emily, it saw a big change before getting out of the committee, didn't it?
Yeah, a significant change, really, Dustin, from the bill's author, Republican State Representative Michelle Davis. The original version of this bill required that the 10 Commandments be displayed in every Indiana school. A change to the bill now makes it optional.
Here's what House Bill 1086 still does. It adds the 10 Commandments to a list of protected writings that already includes the U.S. and Indiana constitutions, along with the Declaration of Independence and other historic speeches and documents. Under the bill, teachers and principals are allowed to post or reference documents on that list. School libraries must include at least one copy of the 10 Commandments. Bottom line, though, instead of the bill being about mandatory religious displays, Tuesday's changes reframe the proposed legislation as one dealing with protected historical documents. Testimony included people for and against the bill.
Nobody who holds this document sacred is unfamiliar with it. They do not need it displayed as a reminder of its content or its importance. Will putting "thou shalt not kill" on the wall reduce school shooting tragedies? I don't think it will. At what age is it appropriate for a history teacher to explain to my daughter what lust and adultery are?
It is the rules that are found in the 10 Commandments that are the basis of our moral right and wrong. It is the basis of our legal system. Every law that you pass has its foundation somewhere in one of those 10 Commandments. So we need to have that up. We need to have it posted. We need to have the opportunity to speak in our public schools about the foundation of our society, the foundation of our legal system, the foundation of moral right and wrong.
The bill also includes protections for students. Students are allowed to reference the 10 Commandments in their schoolwork.
House Bill 1086 passed out of committee this week by a vote of 8-3. It will need to get through a final vote on Monday from the full House to advance to the Senate. Dustin?
All right, Emily, thank you. Nikki, I wonder if this change, because going from must display to may display is significant, but I wonder if that's going to be enough to get it across the finish line and not face legal challenges.
I probably so. I mean, it's such a massive change. It's the difference between seeing it in every school versus just letting it. And the ACLU of Indiana has been clear. They're fighting a separate issue on putting the 10 Commandments on the State House grounds, that would be unconstitutional. But I don't know that they would spend their capital on a may provision versus a shall.
To be continued. Lawmakers advanced a large deregulation bill that would roll back some school rules. Our 13 Investigates reporter Sierra Putman has tracked this controversy involving this bill that looked to eliminate some school safety rules. Take a look here.
House Bill 1004 is huge. The first draft was nearly 170 pages, and buried inside was a push to repeal a law that protected kids with diabetes in school. It's also called Hunter's Law. This law was passed back in 2007. 9-year-old Hunter Seago testified about how he would miss class time and was even asked to leave his school because of his diabetes. This law made it so kids could manage their disease on their own by doing things like checking their blood sugar in class. It also encouraged teachers and other educators to get trained to help kids and provided them legal protections if they did. Hunter is now a 29-year-old medical student who still advocates for the law.
This bill or law has enabled me to be who I am and get to where I am today, and has allowed a lot of other Hoosiers to get the education that they deserve. And so it's vital that we don't take a step backwards.
The American Diabetes Association agrees. It sent a letter to lawmakers saying repealing Hunter's Law would be a dangerous step backward, while the Indiana School Boards Association recommended repealing it, arguing kids with diabetes already are protected by federal law.
and obviously it's not. Otherwise, this law wouldn't have been passed in 2007.
Representative Becky Cash put forth an amendment to save Hunter's Law, which the House passed with overwhelming support this week. HB 1004 has faced quite a bit of controversy. It also would have repealed a new school AED law. Lawmakers stopped that effort last week. 2 laws saved following outrage from families and advocates. Sierra Putman, 13 Investigates.
And that bill is now on its way to the House, despite the controversy. So this isn't the first thing that lawmakers have tried to eliminate and then amended to get it put back in.
Yeah, that always happens in these sort of large-scale deregulation bills. I think you start with, it's almost like ask for more than you know you're going to get. You start with this massive package, and then each little thing probably has, a legitimate purpose, and it was put in the law for a reason, and so those constituencies reach out and get it kind of pulled back. We're also seeing a similar thing happen on a bill about boards and commissions that they want to get rid of, as they put out like a 400-page thing, getting rid of hundreds of boards and commissions, and then they slowly kind of take a few of those back out.
It seems like a lot of work to the layperson, although somebody else might just call it politics. So, all right. Thank you, Nikki. Do you expect any attempt, by the way, to the attempts in the Senate to bring back more things that have been cut?
Oh, sure. I'm sure there are lobbyists and regular Hoosiers out there who there are lots of programs in that bill that they are supporting. And so if they can get the ear of a legislator to file an amendment, I'm sure that will occur.
Okay. We'll all be watching. Thanks. Appreciate it. It's certainly no secret Indiana has some of the lowest voter turnout numbers in the country. Now, a new study is shedding light on why so many Hoosiers don't vote, particularly when it comes to young people. Look at this. This is from a nonpartisan nonprofit group called Recenter Indiana. Only 39% of Hoosiers between 18 and 34 years old voted in the last election. Nationally, it was almost 50%. So why is that? Well, this survey found these young Hoosiers don't feel like their voices have enough influence, basically. They say they don't believe government is listening to them. Overall, the most cited reason for not voting was that they don't think their vote matters. On top of that, the study also found obstacles that make it harder for young adults to actually cast a ballot, like work schedules, long lines at the polling place, and limited election day hours. The survey is from 307 Indiana residents ages 18 to 34 who were registered to vote but did not cast a ballot in the 2024 election. So what's your takeaway here, Nikki? I think on the one hand, it's disheartening to hear that so many young people think that their vote doesn't matter. I'm reminded of the big campaign in the 80s, Rock the Vote, right? Yep. To counter that, and here we are again.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people in all segments of the age ranges think that, right? But the fact is if you're not voting, then you don't know if it does matter. Right. I mean, you're kind of like not even giving them a chance to take your vote into consideration by sitting it out.
And we've heard about impediments to voting. But as you and I were discussing before the show started, the polls are open from 6 to 6 on election day. If you have to work late, you can show up at 6 a.m. before you go to work. And also, that's to say nothing about absentee voting.
Yeah, I mean, we have early voting, in-person early voting for 30 days before an election. So that is one part that I have trouble kind of accepting. I mean, if you want to vote, there are myriad of opportunities for you to do so.
All right, we've got much more to come here on Crossroads Politics.
Because we're saying if we're going to have a situation like an issue in like Boston, we are prepared. Indiana is prepared.
Republicans and Democrats clash over a bill that would let the governor deploy military police in Indiana. We'll talk about that, and the governor outlines his vision for workforce development and adult education as he fights to make Indiana a state that works. But first,
to make sure that we rein in ICE appropriately and make it more professional.
Congress must stop them.
A government shutdown looms after immigration agents shoot and kill a man in Minnesota. How the political fallout could put the entire federal government on hold, at least partially. It's next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. A second deadly shooting involving immigration agents in Minnesota has the federal government on the verge of another shutdown. NBC's Alice Barr explains why a push for accountability for DHS could have ripple effects across the country.
Shutdown struggles reemerging on Capitol Hill as overnight a plan to fast-track a government funding vote hit a snag in the Senate, with at least one senator objecting, just hours after President Trump announced a deal had been reached.
We've gotten along very well. We're working on trying to get it to stay open.
5 sources say the plan was to pass a chunk of government funding while splitting off the Department of Homeland Security and taking 2 weeks to negotiate immigration enforcement reforms Democrats are demanding, including ending roving raids and no agents in masks. Bipartisan lawmakers have signaled a willingness to negotiate.
To make sure that we rein in ICE appropriately and make it more professional.
Congress must stop them.
President Trump overnight appearing to shift course again on his administration's response in Minneapolis, asked if immigration enforcement agents would soon start pulling out.
No, not at all.
That after earlier in the day, his border czar, Tom Homan, said this.
My main focus now is drawdown.
Adding that reducing federal manpower in the city depends on cooperation with state and local law enforcement for more targeted migrant removals, focusing in jails and prisons.
The mission is going to improve.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry in Washington pressing for a full federal pullout and an overhaul of officer conduct as his city reels from this month's deadly shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
People can see with their own eyes how the funding for ICE is being utilized right now, and it's not creating safety in our communities, it's causing chaos.
If the Senate does reach a government funding agreement before tonight's midnight shutdown deadline, it still has to go back to the House, and they're not in Washington right now. A brief weekend partial shutdown is unlikely to cause major problems, but they'll need to act fast with transportation funding part of what's on the line. That could mean more airport delays coming. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
I reached out to all of our Indiana lawmakers in Congress over the past week to get their reaction to the shooting of Alex Preddy. Senator Todd Young said he supports a transparent investigation into what happened. He said, quote, "Providing the American people with the full facts is an important part of maintaining public trust. We also need state and local officials to better cooperate with federal enforcement efforts. Let's all work to lower the political temperature in the days to come." That coming from Senator Todd Young. Congresswoman Erin Houchin also responded, calling for an investigation, but also laying blame at the feet of protesters. Her statement said, in part, "What we need to look into more deeply are the tactics of the organized agitators actively and purposefully interfering with law enforcement. I've worked alongside law enforcement for years. What these officers are having to deal with simply to do their jobs is absurd and dangerous." We also took time to speak with several leaders here in Indianapolis, including Governor Mike Braun, about the shooting and how ICE is going about enforcement.
Not a sanctuary state, nor do we have sanctuary cities, in the fact that we're working with them, not promoting resistance that you can see that ends up in tragedies like we've seen in Minneapolis. So I think that we're going to be an entirely different case. And so far, we've been able to work with ICE as opposed to having the kind of confrontation you've seen occur in Minneapolis and a few other places.
And the leader of the Senate, President Pro Tem Rod Bray, also voiced concern for Preddy's loved ones and the ICE agents in Minnesota. Take a listen.
Yeah, I'm like every other American. I watched that with very serious interest. It's a tragedy to see those 2 lives lost. And but I don't have any more expertise on that than anybody else in the across the nation. I've just watched with a lot of concern. My hope is that leadership up there kind of takes a look at that and tries to make some changes so that the need is great to deal with immigration issues, but those 2 pieces are tragic, and we'd like to see it not that ever happen again.
This week, Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett named Tanya Terry his pick to be the next chief for the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, and we asked her how she would respond if ICE came to Indiana's capital city. She said IMPD was focused on serving the community.
Our officers are ready to serve.
all members of our community, regardless of their background or immigration status. And our priority remains the safety and the trust of every member of the community that lives here in Indianapolis.
We have much more on the ongoing immigration crackdown. You can find that on our website at WTHR.com. And coming up, much more from Governor Braun on ICE and jobs, too.
We're spending 1/3 of what we were in prior administrations.
He'll highlight his push for job growth and job training. But first,
Indiana would be one of the only states with a permanent government-controlled military force.
state lawmakers clash over deploying military police in Indiana cities. It's next on Crossroads Politics. Democratic lawmakers are raising alarms about a bill that would let the governor deploy military police to Indiana cities. Let's head back to the State House. Emily, they're calling the bill dangerous.
Yeah, they called it dangerous. One Democratic state representative called it playing with fire. This is House Bill 1343, and there are a lot of parts to it. The one part, though, that is causing such controversy and such a stir is the part of the bill that would allow the Indiana National Guard to create a military police force within its ranks. And that police force, the governor would be able to send that police force to different cities and towns across Indiana, and they would have police authority.
Voted Tyler roll call, so 77 ayes, 29 noes. Bill's passed.
Lawmakers in the House spent hours debating the bill before passing it by a vote of 67 to 29. If 1343 becomes law, the Indiana National Guard could create a military police force within its ranks. The governor would be able to send that police force into any Indiana city or town with full police powers. For that to happen, the police force would have to be called to active duty and complete military police occupational training and Indiana law enforcement training. Right now, the Indiana National Guard already assists during emergencies. This bill formally expands and codifies police authority. Several Democrats spoke out against the bill Wednesday, expressing several concerns, among them that giving the National Guard police powers in Indiana would erode public trust and trample on local control.
Indiana would be one of the only states with a permanent government-controlled military force. Indiana would give its governor broader unilateral deployment powers over any other state in our nation. That's the facts.
Republicans say the bill mirrors a similar law in Massachusetts that gave the National Guard their police authority after the Boston Marathon bombing. They also point to support from law enforcement groups and say this proposed law would enhance public trust.
I think this bill is not reactionary. I think it's proactive. Because we're saying if we're going to have a situation like an issue in like Boston, we are prepared. Indiana is prepared.
Now, several lawmakers who oppose this bill, all of them Democrats, referenced what's been going on in Minneapolis for the past couple of weeks with ICE saying that that's a warning, fearing that something like that could happen here if this military police force was created. In the end, the bill did pass out of the House, and it now heads to the Senate for consideration for this second half of the legislative session. Dustin?
All right, keep us posted, Emily. Thank you. Nikki, we've seen some of the online comments around this bill that people have some confusion about what the National Guard can do. It's illegal for federal troops to do police work, but not state troops, right? So if that's the case, then what does this bill actually do?
Well, I think some of the confusion is, yes, could the governor send the National Guard in his city right now, say for flood damage or whatever? Of course. But they don't have police powers. You know, they can't arrest people or seize property, whereas this military policing unit would be able to do those kinds of things. And so I think, you know, the National Guard is making it sound like, oh, we already have some policing units and this would just pull them all together and give them some more training. I think there is a little bit of difference, though, between that and what's in this bill.
Gotcha. Is there any movement to tweak this, or is this a black and white issue, you think?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any room for discussion on this. I think the undercurrent, of course, is because we've heard for years now that Republicans think the city of Indianapolis has a public safety problem, and they're not happy with how the Democrat mayor and prosecutor have dealt with it. So I think the undercurrent is fear that it would be used in a situation like that, as opposed to some of the other examples, obviously in war and, you know, that they kept bringing up the Boston Marathon attack and how the National Guard there didn't have proper training then. And so, you know, I think those, you know, were good, but there's also part of the law that says he can just do it for whatever reason he finds necessary.
Okay. Thank you for your time. You're going to head back to the State House. Appreciate it. We'll see you next week. We've got more to come.
Already, a lot of companies using it. So we're kind of solving a problem from a different angle.
Getting more and better jobs for Hoosiers. It's next on Crossroads Politics. This week, Emily sat down with Governor Braun to talk about a number of topics, including workforce development and the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. Take a listen.
We're going to start with some questions about Power Up Indiana,
Yes.
right? So you've emphasized growing talent from within. Why is that a better strategy, talent from within, as opposed to also maybe looking without?
Because if you don't get it from within, you got to get people to move here. And the biggest thing I'm trying to do through education in general and workforce techniques like this is to take the assets we have. When it comes K through 12, it's a different subject, but especially skills, making sure now that we got diplomas that stress skills and college trajectory. We got 135,000 jobs out there that need better skills, better training. So look at your own employees to see how you can skill them up. It's easier to fill in maybe at the jobs that require fewer skills that you bring in to replace. And we came up with an innovative program that will invest up to $5,000 to help you give those skills as long as you're going to raise the wage by 25%. Already, a lot of companies using it. So we're kind of solving a problem from a different angle. We're the highest economic growth rate reflected recently, and our GDP is growing twice that of Ohio and Illinois, 3 times Kentucky's, 6 times Michigan. That means we're going to have low unemployment rates, and we got to do a better job from start to finish on skills, degrees, workforce development, and affordable housing. That all fits into having employees for the jobs that we are naturally creating.
How do we make sure that this isn't just a reimbursement program for raises that companies were already planning to give anyway?
Well, it's set up to where they're having to present a plan of what they're doing that's going to, when you're going to pay somebody a wage or a salary that's 25% more, that would generally be very incremental and to be over a long period of time. This is to pour resources into doing it more quickly. And so it's a question of how much time and so forth. So we'll be able to measure that so it's not just gaming the system.
What if a company later would cut jobs or roll back wages? Are there clawbacks or penalties? We have something set up in that way, guardrails?
At this point, if you get into an economic downturn, that is something that obviously you'd tweak to a bill. Here, our issue has been mostly struggling through thick and thin to find enough workforce. The only time we ran into that in a systemic way was 08, 09. The whole country dealt with it. Indiana did better there as well. During COVID, that was the federal government's policies that were mismanaging things. Indiana, again, came through it better. So even in running a business over the years, a lot of times through those difficult periods, you run your operations better. You find ways to make them work more efficiently, and that's how you get through that.
How do we make sure that the program is reaching small businesses that might not have these huge HR departments to deal with all the paperwork and the application
Because that goes
process?
along with the fact that the only thing I've created outside of trying to make government run more efficiently, lean it up, was the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So we're focusing on Main Street, on entrepreneurs and small businesses more than ever before. And this is just one tool that they can use.
What's being done to make sure it benefits lower wage workers as opposed to folks that are making more money? Or
well,
in
however
management
you're
sectors?
going from it's more apt that the lower the wage is, the easier it's going to be to bump it 25%. So on the other hand, if you're already at 30 and you want to get up to 33 or 34 bucks on the way to getting to maybe closer to 38, it's aimed where it works all along the spectrum. So, and the other thing that I don't think we mentioned is on what we're doing with economic development is we're spending 1/3 of what we were in prior administrations, from about 55,000 down to 17,000, and we're actually generating wages that are closer to 41 bucks versus 36.
How do you view this? Do you view this as a short-term incentive program, or do you view this as a broader shift?
Ideally, in the long run, if companies see that you can actually skill up your own employees, that they do more of it on their own. There should be no government program that keeps growing and growing if there is a substitute, or you've primed the pump by showing how it can be done.
How does it complement or replace traditional tools like job training grants or economic development?
I think all the other stuff still stays in place. And I remember when I was on our local school board, 04 to 14, in arguably the lowest unemployment town and county in our state. I mean, it's measured by 2%. 3% is, high unemployment. We weren't directing our own educational resources to emphasize career and technical education, things that we used to do years ago that we've gotten away from. The jobs when my brother was running the Department of Workforce Development, 65,000 of them then, back in the Pence administration. Now it's 130,000 that need more skills, to where you can get a job right out of high school that'll pay more than 90% of most degrees. We're getting that balanced, and we'll keep working that way. And the more we do it in terms of educating in a way that has the right balance, probably the less remediation you'll need through all the workforce development stuff.
Let me switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of reports, several tips actually, that federal immigration agents are reserving a large number of hotel rooms in Indianapolis, and that ICE is about to have a surge here of activity in Indianapolis. Can you confirm or deny those reports?
So you don't get any advance notice of that. I know with what we've done to cooperate with the administration, we're not a sanctuary state, nor do we have sanctuary cities, and the fact that we're working with them, not promoting resistance that you can see that ends up in tragedies like we've seen in Minneapolis. So I think that we're going to be an entirely different case, and so far we've been able to work with ICE as opposed to having the kind of confrontation you've seen occur in Minneapolis and a few other places.
Speaking of those tragedies, speaking of the deaths that have happened, the president has said, I think it was yesterday, that American citizens shouldn't bring guns around ICE. How would you preserve Hoosiers' rights to peacefully assemble and bear arms during ICE activity, especially given we're an open carry state,
I think when you're coming in armed, you've got the right to do it through a Second Amendment. I'm a big believer of it. You're putting yourself in a position to where I think, number one, you're actively resisting, impeding. That's different. And having a firearm even makes the likelihood of something occur. Yes, it's a conflict of two interests: peaceful protest, keeping and bearing arms, Second Amendment. But I think it's the individual that has to weigh those two. And the fact, when you are through your state governments, your local government, encouraging that kind of fighting with ICE out there in the fray, it, to me, is an irresponsibility there. You should be doing what most places are doing, and that's cooperating to remove the worst first. And I don't think they've chosen a different approach. I think it's backfired on them.
I mean, to the point of removing the worst first. I mean, we've received reports and seen reports all over the country, specifically in Minneapolis, of children and American citizens being arrested, not necessarily the worst first.
I think that's a exception to the rule. The fact, when you're out there, got to remember, this was all caused by a prior administration that actively promoted open borders. And we're dealing with the consequences of it. And you can see that that was an intentional effort to do it because it took so little time to secure the borders on the same legislative template. So I think a lot of what you're seeing here, you got to go back to the original source of it, and that was bad policy that was voted against in a mandate to secure the borders. And now dealing with the enforcement of removing individuals that broke the law coming in and then break the law again, that's the focus. And I think Indiana's in a place where we are cooperating. We never became a sanctuary state or having cities doing it. Those that did, I think, are dealing with most of the consequences of an open border.
As a governor, how would you protect the right of legal immigrants, refugees, and residents here in the face of ICE activity?
I mean, there are going to be investigations into what happened in the 2 incidents that occurred in Minneapolis, and I think those have to be dealt with in a fair way. And I think we've protected ourselves mostly against it because we've never engendered the context that's creating the issues in places like Minnesota, Illinois, California, New York, because they were all on board with the bad policies from the Biden administration.
I want to ask you just about a House Bill 1343. I think you must be familiar with it. It would allow a military police force to be created within the National Guard. You would have some, jurisdiction over that. Why does Indiana need a military police force with civilian police powers, and what limits would be put on it so that it doesn't impede with regular law enforcement activity or people assembling or protesting?
So when you're overwhelmed, like you can be by certain situations, other states have done it. We're not creating the wheel here. I think even heard Massachusetts might have some version of it. It is to, within your own National Guard, have individuals trained to where they get into that particular situation, they're going to be used to that dynamic. And I think it's better to be prepared than not, to where you'd have to send in general guardsmen that weren't trained for that specifically, and other states have done it as well.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Dustin Grove. For Nikki, Emily, Jenna, and everybody here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.